The topic of my dissertation is something I care very much about. I've chosen to talk about the conditions of black people since the era of slavery until today because I believe it is important to remember the enormous difficulties and injustices many people before me were subject to. When we refer to slavery, it is always linked to racism. Even if this is partially true, the main cause were economic interests and the need of strong people capable to work under prohibitive life conditions. Back in 1661, when it was officially recognized, it was clear that not every white man was in favor of slavery, but because of the fear of becoming victims of the majority of people who supported it, a long time passed without a proper opposition. The situation in the United States saw the North with few slaves, while it was the opposite in the South, where strict laws were created against them. The slave trade went on for more than 200 years, until they tried to put an end to it with Abraham Lincoln, a moderate Republican of the North, elected president during 1861. In order to halt slavery from spreading, Lincoln established that it couldn't be extended to the new territories, but it would have remained within the states where it was already in force. This was considered unacceptable by the states of the South, and 7 of them separated from the United States and formed the Confederated States, beginning the American Civil War. At the end of the war, slavery was completely abolished on January 31st, 1865. Despite the fact this was an accomplishment for the black community, the association of Lincoln and the need for cooperation between the North and the South for economic reasons brought the annulment of all progress made until that moment. It got to a point where slavery was replaced by segregation, which meant separation of the races in all aspects of everyday life. Blacks were separated from whites on buses, in schools, churches, public places. There were also different Bibles in which black and whites had to take an oath in court. Racist organization became increasingly more powerful. One of the most important was and still is today the Ku Klux Klan, whose culture is based on one main concept, the supremacy of whites above every other race. And on this principle, they were and are willing to commit the most atrocious things, such as lynching and bombing black voters. The two great wars brought with them the illusion for blacks to be finally part of America. In fact, if initially there weren't blacks in the army, things changed, mostly during the Second World War. Training schools for blacks were created and consequently they had the possibility to cover more prestigious roles even in the Navy, where they always had very humble jobs. All these improvements create the illusion that once home, the situation would have been different. Obviously, this wasn't the case. Because of the Great Depression, unemployment rose and black people were the first to be fired and the last to be employed. Some of them decided to find fortune elsewhere, while others decided to stay and fight to change the situation. In Montgomery, Alabama, the spark that triggered the movements was the refusal of Rosa Parks to give her place to a white man. This event mobilized many organizations and made a boycott of 381 days of the buses begin, and the main organizer was Martin Luther King. Dr. King was a fundamental part in the fight for civil rights. Thanks to the non-violence technique conceived by Mahatma Gandhi and learned during university, he managed to conduct peaceful protests that had brought enormous results not only in Montgomery but in many other cities. The March on Washington, where he gave his famous speech, I Have a Dream. The March on Selma, when many peaceful protesters were beaten and killed by the police, represent milestones in the history of civil rights. If Martin Luther King believed in the cooperation between the two races, Malcolm Little, better known as Malcolm X, thought that the only way to live in peace was the complete separation of the two races. He encouraged black people to be united against the oppression of whites. His declarations made him unpopular not only among white people who saw him as a messenger of hate and discard, but even among blacks who believed in integration. After the death of these two important characters, the atmosphere during the 60s became agitated, and the Black Panther Party was founded, formed by black men and women that promoted self-defense, using armies and violence if necessary. When they became politically relevant and therefore a threat for the government, the FBI began a campaign of espionage and assassination to weaken the party, depriving it of all its leaders. Without the strong military organization that was its brand, it disappeared from both the political and social scene. The fight for civil rights went on for many years, and in 2008 it seems that in America the goal of equality was finally reached with the election of the first black president of the United States, Barack Obama. This was just a great illusion since according to a survey of the Washington Post, between 2013 and 2015, the police is statistically more inclined to shoot a black man rather than a white. Cases in which black people are killed during unclear circumstances by a white officer are increasing. Moreover, very few of them ended with the sanction of the officer. The fact that white officers are not being punished for their actions is creating a tense atmosphere in the US that if it's not altered, it could bring to dreadful consequences. I conclude by saying that the racial problem does not only concern America but the entire world. In Italy, with the immigration problems that we are living today, there is the tendency to bestow the crimes of the few to all the community. Therefore, racism is an actual problem on our peninsula. My hope is that with time we will not go back but go forward, respecting more what is different, if it is even fair to call it this way.